Everybody. Welcome to our advisory committee meeting for the Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education. And this is our February 2023 meeting. We're pleased that you've chosen to join us, and
This meeting is being recorded.
And thank you to all the advisory committee members for joining as well. Because we're conducting via WebEx, I would ask that all of the advisory committee meetings, when you're introducing or if you have a comment, please state your name for the clarity of the record. All of the advisory committee members and other presenters have the ability to mute and unmute themselves throughout the meeting. We will welcome public comments for every item on the agenda. We'll do that at the end of discussion, but before any action is taken on that item. For that, members of the public that want to make a comment, our moderator will make a clear notation that you can type into the chat that you would like to make a comment. So you just use the chat feature to say, I would like to make a comment. And then she will unmute your microphone. You will have 3 minutes to make a public comment. Public comments are restricted to the specific agenda item. And the most important thing probably for you to remember and keep in mind is that this is not a venue for conversation or dialogue between the advisory committee meeting or BPPE staff and the public. These are really time for you to provide input and feedback, but not questions per se. And there's an email address for you to do that. You can email any questions to bppe@dca.ca.gov, and that will be repeated at those agenda items as well. So in our first item on the agenda, we're going to introduce ourselves, that is the advisory committee members and the bureau chief, and establish a quorum. To that end, I'll start us off. My name is Joseph Holt. I am an institutional representative and serving currently as the chair of the advisory committee. And Margaret?
Hi, this is Margaret Ryder. I'm the vice chair and consumer representative.
Kansen?
Hi, this is Kansen Chu, community representative.
Thanks, Kansen. And Melanie?
I'm Melanie Delgado. I am a consumer representative.
Thanks, Melanie. And Tess?
Good morning, Tess Dubois-Carey, institutional representative.
Good. And Lee?
Good morning, Lee Farron, consumer representative.
Thank you, Lee. Good morning. Do we have a representative from Senator Roth's office with us today?
We do not, but we do have a quorum.
Okay, great. And how about Assemblymember Medina? Do we have a representative here?
Not at the moment.
Okay. And then we have a Robert Boykin, I think, is in absence unless I'm missing something. Is Robert Boykin on the call?
I believe he has just joined us.
Oh, okay. Okay, and so moderator, you can work with Robert Boykin maybe to elevate him and unmute his mic.
Exactly, Robert. I see that you're unmuted, but I am not hearing your voice. Co-moderator, if we can go to the technical slide deck, slide 11 or 12, I believe. 12 would be easier. And hopefully these remedies will help your connection.
We'll pause for a moment here to hopefully get Robert up and running.
And as a side note, Mr. Boykin, if you cannot figure it out, sometimes logging out and logging back in does actually cure all their problems. So that's an option as well. And it looks like he's taken that option.
That's the auto response from all help desks, right? Is restart your computer.
Surprisingly, it usually works.
Yeah, it honestly does. Okay, we'll go carry in the interest of time and the sense that we have already a quorum, we'll hopefully be able to get Robert up and running, but regardless, we'll go ahead and move on with the agenda. And so thank you, Richie, for confirming that we have established a quorum. Our first item of business on the agenda I don't need to stop for public comment, Debbie, on the introductions and establishment of a quorum, I'm assuming.
I don't believe so, but I will let our legal counsel tell us, give us the definitive answer.
I'm sorry, can you ask that question again?
Do we need public comment on agenda item 1, welcome introductions and establishment of quorum?
No, you don't.
Great. Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you. So our next item of business is our elections for advisory committee chair and vice chair. As you all know, I am serving currently in the chair role. Margaret is serving as the vice chair. The recent change in our handbook, which was prompted by a change in the statute, requires annual elections for those positions. And so we're getting newly into that rhythm. You'll recall that we were to do this at our last meeting, the first meeting of the year, and we weren't prepared in advance to do so. So we've moved it to this meeting. So at this time, members of the advisory committee, you're welcome to nominate a candidate for the chair. There is a limit on 2 consecutive terms, and I believe we're treating my term as having been my first term and Margaret's as having been her first term since we implemented the new policy a year ago. So would take any nominations for a chair at this time.
I'd like to nominate yourself, Joseph.
Okay.
This is Tess Dubois-Carey.
Got it. Are there any other nominations? And I would accept that nomination. Are there any other nominations for a chair? Okay, I guess that would make that, Debbie, an up or down vote on that in the absence of other nominations.
I believe that's true, but do we need to take a, do we need to do public comment before,
Oh, yeah, we do. We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we
And
do. So let's get the nomination for the vice chair at the same time then before we do that. So again, one last call for nominations for chair, committee chair. Okay, open for nominations for vice chair for the committee.
If she would be willing to accept it, I would nominate Lee Farron for the vice chair. This is Margaret Ryder speaking.
Yeah, I didn't know you could nominate someone else to take over your position, Margaret. That was a good, pretty good play.
Well,
I know. I feel like that's a trick there.
well, I've been doing it for quite some time, even though the rules just changed for a 1-year limit. So if she's willing to do it, I would certainly nominate her to take over the position. If she'd accept the nomination.
I'm willing to accept the nomination. Thank you, Margaret.
Great. Any other nominations for the vice chair?
Before we go, I do see that that our new member, Robert Boykin, looks like he's back online. Maybe we could just check to see if his microphone is working and let him introduce himself so that way he can participate in the vote.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
I'm sorry, Member Boykin, we are not hearing your voice. Thank you for the display. Sometimes if you need to choose your headset versus your speakers and something like that. If you have any other programs open on your computer that were using your microphone, you may need to quit out of that program in order to get WebEx to recognize your microphone. And it does, I can suggest slide 11 does offer a visual aid for calling in. Sometimes people use their cell phone as their speaker and microphone, and that usually works fine too.
Okay, Debbie, we want to go ahead and carry on as he continues to work on that.
I think that's right. I think we'll figure out some troubleshooting with him separately.
Okay, yeah, and maybe we can do that offline as well. So we have a nomination for myself, Joseph Holt, for chair, and Lee Farron for vice chair. And we're going to go ahead and open to public comment on this agenda item 2. A reminder that this is not time for Q&A. This is simply for feedback for the committee. If you type into chat that you want to make a public comment, our moderator will unmute your microphone, and you have a time limit of 3 minutes for each comment. And we'll take feedback under consideration before taking a vote on the chair and vice chair. Moderator, would you go ahead and open for public comment?
Certainly. We're using the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. So if you would like to make a comment on the nominations for chair and vice chair, you can look for the question mark icon, click on that, type the word comment in the text box, and click send. The other option is for anyone to raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and each recognized person will have 3 minutes to speak. If you are a call-in user, you can press *3 to raise your hand. Are there any requests for comment on the nominations? And I do see committee member Kevin Powers was just able to join. But I do not see any requests for comment on the nominations. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Joseph, you're muted.
We do hear you. Shall I?
Yes, you can go ahead and close public comment, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome in, Kevin. Did you want to do a mic check real quick, Kevin?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Perfect. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So we have the election now. Let's start with taking a roll call vote for the chair, and that is nominating me to serve my second and final term as chair of the committee. And Richie, do you want to take the roll call vote for us?
Yes. Joseph Holt.
Yes.
Margaret Ryder.
Yes.
Kansen Chu.
Aye.
Tess Dubakari.
Yes.
Lee Farron.
Yes.
Melanie Delgado.
Yes.
And then give Robert one more chance.
Hello?
Hey, we got you.
Finally. Sorry about that.
So on the vote, Robert, yay or nay?
Yay.
That's all members.
Very good. Thank you. And then we'll move on to Lee Farron, nominated as vice chair for the committee.
Joseph Holt.
Yes.
Margaret Ryder.
Yes.
Robert Boykin.
Yes.
Kansen Chu.
Yes.
Melanie Delgado.
Yes.
Tess Dubakari.
Yes.
Lee Farron.
I guess I have to vote for myself. Yes.
That's all members.
Very good. Thank you all. And thank you especially, Lee, for stepping into that role. And the biggest thanks of all, Margaret, for you and your faithful service. I appreciate all that you've done for that. We'll move on now to our agenda item number 4, which is the review and approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was on November 16th. Advisory committee members have received those in advance and had an opportunity to review. So we'll open to discussion at this point to see if anybody has any corrections or revisions to the minutes as published.
Joseph, we have item 3 here. Public comments.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. So sorry, Richie. Yes, I jumped over public comments on items not on the agenda. Excuse me all. So agenda item number 3 is open for public comment. This is specifically for items that are not on our agenda today. As I mentioned earlier, every public comment period at the close of an agenda item is specific and limited to that agenda item specifically. So if, as a member of the public, you have a comment on anything that is not on our agenda today, this is the singular opportunity that you have to make a comment on that. Again, this is not a Q&A or a dialogue with BPPE staff or advisory committee members, but it is your opportunity to make comment on any item that is not currently on the agenda. Clarification, we do have a later agenda item for future agenda items. So if you want to make a suggestion for a future agenda item, we will take that up under number 8 on today's agenda. And so this is a general open period for comments on items not on the agenda. And Anne, moderator, would you please open for public comment?
Certainly. So we've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If you would like to make a comment on anything that is not listed elsewhere on the agenda, you can click on the question mark icon, typically in the lower right of your WebEx screen, or behind the 3-dot other options if you are on a mobile device. Type the word comment into that text box and click send. If you are a call-in user, you can raise your hand by pressing *3, and anyone else may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Is it okay if I call you Anne instead of moderator?
Certainly, thank you.
Okay. And thanks again, Richie, for catching me there. We are now officially on to agenda item 4, which is a review and approval of the minutes. So open again to the advisory committee for any corrections or revisions to the minutes of our last meeting. And hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. This is Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret. And do we have a second?
This is Tess. I'll second.
Thank you, Tess. And then prior to our vote, we will open agenda item 4 to public comment. Anne, would you please open that now?
Certainly, we've reopened the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment on the minutes. If you'd like to make a comment or found an edit on the minutes, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right of your WebEx screen. Type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. And call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Are there comments on the minutes? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And Richie, will you take us through a vote?
Yes. Joseph Ho,
Yes.
Margaret Ryder,
Yes.
Robert Boykin,
Yes.
Kansan Chu,
Aye.
Melanie Delgado,
Yes.
Tess Dubakari,
Yes.
Lee Farron.
Yes.
That's all voting members.
Thanks, Richie. And now we'll move on to agenda item number 5, where we'll hear remarks from representative of the DCA. I believe we have Melissa Gear, the Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations. Is that correct, Debbie?
It looks like she's just coming onto camera and trying to unmute herself right now.
Hello and good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. And good morning, Chair Holt, Vice Chair Ryder, Chief Cochran, and members of the Advisory Committee. I'm Melissa Gear, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations. I appreciate the opportunity to provide the Department of Consumer Affairs update this morning. I have several updates that I will be sharing this morning, starting with the DCA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee, which is comprised of DCA, board, and bureau leadership. The DEI committee held its second meeting on January 27th and established the committee's charter, discussed changes to the strategic planning process, and development of a DEI fact sheet. Additional resources will be forthcoming that the boards will be able to use and incorporate into their strategic plans and communications. Next is an update regarding strategic planning. The department's DEI steering committee is working to implement the governor's executive order issued in September of last year, which directs state departments to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion into their strategic plans. DCA's solid team is working with the DEI steering committee to develop DEI-related questions for inclusion in environmental scan surveys and SWOT analyses to help guide the boards and bureaus in developing DEI-related goals and objectives as part of their strategic plans. Sample DEI objectives will also be provided to further assist the boards and bureaus. Additionally, DCA is developing video messages from leaders to explain their perspective on DEI and how it relates to the board's roles as regulators and policymakers. Once these new DEI components have been finalized and approved, Solid will begin working with DCA's boards and bureaus on the development of new strategic plans or updating of existing strategic plans. We will keep your executive officer updated as more information becomes available. In addition, there are 2 DCA-wide mandatory trainings for 2023. This includes sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness. All DCA employees and appointees, including board members, will need to complete the sexual harassment prevention training this year. This training is required every odd-numbered year and is approximately 2 hours. Both the sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness training are available in the department's learning management system, which we commonly refer to as LMS. Both trainings can be accessed online at any time. In the next few weeks, information will be sent out via email on how to access those trainings. Looking ahead to June, it is unclear what the outcome will be regarding our ability to continue hybrid or virtual meetings. I do not have any additional information to share at this time, but we are closely monitoring this issue and we will provide an update and guidance as soon as it becomes available. And as I come to a close, DCA and the BBR team look forward to working with and assisting you throughout this new year. We are here to support you and the important work that you do. Please reach out anytime. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I welcome any questions from the advisory committee.
Thank you very much, Melissa. I have one question to start off the committee dialogue. I understand that we don't have clarity yet on the meeting status fall after June. Could you give us a quick reminder of what the drivers are for that? I understand I believe it's legislative, but if you can describe who has to make a decision and when we expect that might happen.
So yes, it is a legislative decision that will have to move its way either through a legislative bill that with the bill introduction deadline being tomorrow.
Right.
So we'll be looking through all of those bills introduced to see if we see anything there. It also can work its way through other means bills. It could be through the budget process as a budget trailer bill. And so we would also be looking there as well. So there are a couple different avenues in which this language could move forward through the legislative process and then be enacted. And so as of now, we have heard there's conversations happening. We just don't have any definitive details on if and when and how the changes will be made.
Got it. And in the absence of a change, we will be meeting in person again after June.
Yes.
Got it. Any other questions from the committee?
I'm not sure the appropriate place to raise this, but is the Bureau going to be doing a new strategic plan, as I understand? If that's the case, then it might be helpful, Richie, if you could send around the old strategic plan to all the members, especially we have some new members, I think, since that last one was done.
I can do that.
Any other questions or comments for the Deputy Director? Very good. We will open up at this time for public comment on agenda item number 5 and the comments of the Deputy Director, Board and Bureau Relations. Anne, would you go ahead and open that now?
Certainly. We've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment on the DCA updates. If you'd like to make a comment, click on the question mark icon, type the word comment, and click send. Or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and calling users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Are there any comments on the DCA update? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close public comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And thank you again, Melissa, for coming. Very good. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, where the bulk of our business is today. So we'll be locked in here for quite a bit. We're going to take public comment on the totality of agenda item 6, although it's separated into its separate areas. So members of the public, if you please make any notes of comments that you're going to want to make. So we'll be in this section for quite some time before we open again for public comment. And as you can see on the agenda, we're separated by a topical area, and we'll take them kind of one at a time. And Debbie, with your support, I'll have you kind of drive the tour through the staff members here.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we're going to start off with an IT system project and a different form than we've had in the past. But I'll turn it over to Jeff Alameda and also Sean O'Connor to lead that discussion update. I see Jeff looks like he is not muted.
Good morning. Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thought I turned on my video, but I'm not seeing myself. Oh, here we go. There it is. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Alameda, and I work in the Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Information Services. I look a little different than the previous presenter for this topic. I'll talk about that in just a moment, but I wanted to introduce myself and give you a little bit of background before I dive into the IT update for BPPE and the Business Modernization Cohort project that you have been a part of for some time now. As I mentioned, my name is Jeff Alameda, and thank you, Debbie, for introducing me. I'm a project manager for the Business Modernization Cohort 1. I've been with DCA for about 15 years. I've worked in various capacities at DCA, at the department, at a board, worked in the contracts and procurement office, worked in the budget office, tackled legislation, tackled regulations. I've been a manager and a supervisor. I've been a business analyst. I've been a software tester, a risk manager, deliverables manager, and now currently the project manager for DCA for the Office of Information Services Project Management Office. So thank you, and thank you, Chair Holt and the advisory committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an IT update today. Let me get my notes here in front of me and we'll get going. So as I mentioned from the outset, I don't look like the previous presenter, a little different in terms of facial features here with the beard, but I'm taking over for the former project director, Sean O'Connor. He has been managing the execution of the Business Modernization Cohort project since the beginning of that project back in 2020. going all the way back to 2016 in terms of development of requirements and contracts and things like that. Sean is still assisting in a strategy session with us and implementing this new functionality in the system to achieve a continuous level of continuity in planning for us going forward. So he is still a part of the weekly operations of the project and maintains a high level input on where we're going and where we're heading in terms of our development for BPPE. So, and I'm gracious for that. I appreciate that. It's very hard to fill his shoes, and I'm attempting to do that, but it's going to be a long road before I actually can. Sean mentioned previously that the project started in 2020 and has had several large functional software releases and several more targeted releases to address improvements and new legislation in its history in terms of the project execution phase. We've talked about those. I believe you're all aware of those, considering those were expressed in detail in the November meeting. I won't touch on those unless there's any questions about that. I'll dive right into our current project efforts that we're working on. Since our last update, we've devoted a chunk of development resources in Q4 of 2022 to improving several items related to current system functionality in the production environment. Having addressed those items, we have now pivoted to our next priority, which I'll mention here in a few moments. Those items we tackled in Q4 consisted of production type issues that were repeated, and we didn't want to make those continuous repeatable issues a common factor in the production environment for end users. And so BPPE put that as the top priority for the end of 2022 to resolve those types of issues. And happily we did, as I mentioned at the end of Q4 for 2022. Moving on to what we're working on now is the remaining project scope. And we've been working to prioritize the remaining project scope into right-sized buckets in order to monitor, manage, and develop those items more efficiently. We have regularly daily discussions at multiple levels with BPPE staff and management to make sure those right-sized buckets don't grow in scope unnecessarily so that we can keep to our planned release targets. Something that we've endeavored to do with not only BPPE, but also the other 3 programs that are in this business modernization cohort 1. It's always a concern to tackle and manage scope throughout a project, as probably the majority of you know. Since the last BPPE meeting, project leadership along with DCA IT resources and the vendor have begun planning a smaller release to move targeted functionality more quickly to production. That has been tested and has minor development outstanding versus holding it back while waiting for other functionality in development to be completed. So this is more of a agile tact methodology effort for us so that we can actually see some success in the production environments sooner than we would have hoped after we reprioritized all of the remaining scope that we talked about a minute ago. This offers us the opportunity to move our STRIF claim online submission and review process into production this spring, along with the conversion of that data from the SAIL legacy system. A more current update that I just got this week from our team members is that BPPE is in the final round of data conversion testing for that STRIF claim data conversion work. User acceptance testing for that is going to begin next week and will include defect identification in that process, as it always has. STRIF claim online submission and review functionality is going to follow that very close behind the data conversion testing, and will also be entering into user acceptance testing very soon. More functionalities from the prioritized buckets will be targeted for rollout later in the summer as we look for smaller scoped opportunities to deploy to production and essentially convert to that quick and swift agile method that I mentioned earlier for various modules and components that we can deploy into the production environment. I'd also want to highlight some functionality that is being developed and tested currently that has been of interest to this committee, the improved institution search functionality. We are looking at rolling out with the new system once we are prepared to execute full SAIL conversion. We'll see a PowerPoint slideshow of that system functionality in just a few moments. Once again, I just want to reiterate that OIS and BPPE leadership meet nearly every week to assess progress and discuss the priority of project efforts. These meetings have been very helpful to me personally since taking over on the project, as I was representing another program in the business modernization cohort. So it's very interesting to uncover and unwrap all of BPPE's licensing and enforcement processes. And I can't thank the staff enough for kind of dragging me along in terms of that education and all of my various questions. So I want to thank you, thank the leadership and the staff on their partnership throughout this project. These types of IT system changes are big changes for an organization, and they have shown a real commitment to seeing it through, considering all the changes that we've been through. I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you may have on this effort. Thanks for your time.
I assume you're available to answer questions after you do the the slide presentation.
I can do that as well.
Okay, because I have questions that relate to that.
Yeah, that was my question. Was are you, Jeff, at this time going to present the representative slides of the different search functionality?
Yeah, I'll move into that. I just wanted to pause here if there were any questions on the overarching delivery of kind of where we're at with the project before diving into that functionality.
So committee, are there any members on the or questions on the overview before we go into the search functionality? Looks like you're good, Jeff.
Okay. I was nervous. I thought I was on mute that entire time. All right, let's see. We're on IT system project. And if you could please proceed to the slide deck for the school search. There it is. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Just an introductory slide deck there about the new school search feature that we're working on. And please hold on this slide for just a moment. This is our lower environment, our test environment, as it indicates on the slide. This is a new version of that institution search that you've likely seen from your current website. This is what we've built so far. The slide decks include what we are building and what we'll continue to build until we get to the full sale conversion release date. So there's opportunities not only to test this over and over again, but there's also opportunities to refine this over and over again as we find various features that we need to enhance. So in consideration of that, this first slide, I just want to pay attention to the branding of this. We are branding this to be more familiar to BPPE. It is a Connect site that's hosted by that software that we've been working with for over 2 years now. And it offers us the ability to manage the content that you see here. So if there's any concerns about the content in terms of verify license or any of the verbiage above in that paragraph, all of that is content management for us in terms of the on-staff state team. We can manage that various content and update that as quickly as we need to. So 2 points here is just the branding and the content management opportunities. Moving on to the next slide. Search tools. These look familiar, I believe. You've seen these before on your current site. Just the update here is the fuzzy search technology that is available to us for the school name and program keyword. Not necessarily for the city drop-down field, but for the other 2 categories. We'll talk about that a bit more on the next slide, please, Ann. So on the school search tool, if you enter the name of the school, it'll show that school in particular if you have the exact name of it. But if you're just entering a part of the name, then it'll show the entire list of all those individuals. And you can dive into a robust fuzzy search if you're unaware of the school that you need to look for. And this example is showing you the opportunities for what's looking like a flight search here on this tab. Moving on to the next slide. Pretty self-explanatory city drop-down choices as you have on your current search functionality on your website. Repeating that here in this search function. Moving on to the next one. We have program keyword, reacts the same way as the school search, fuzzy search option as well. And then we'll pull all various programs related to that keyword search request. Moving on, and this one, search results. So back to a version of this image you saw previously, but after entering into those search parameters and then clicking search, you'll see the results of your search here below. The update to this functionality is you have the extract or export to Excel tool. As you can see there in the image a little bit, in the middle on the left, You can export the entire list if you need to research further outside of this search function, or just have a question that you need to make a call in regards to one of the institution names listed here on the search function. So that'll be a new feature for end users coming in this tool. Moving on to the search results. This is including the name of the school. I'm reading from left to right in the image that you see here. And the name of the school, the primary status of the school, and then the secondary status. This might be missing for many schools in the test environment, but this will be resolved in a production release situation. So as you can see from the two examples, the first one's missing a secondary status only because we're playing with test record data and fictitious record data that may not be populated in all fields as we do our testing. The expiration date of the school is following that to the right, and then the action. So you have the action capability to view details, which we'll dive into in a moment here, and allows users to see a more robust collaboration of information than current in our current search tool. Moving on to the details on the next slide, thanks, Sam, is they have become more robust and more inclusive in terms of drilling into various different fields for an institution. For example, custodian of records, locations, discipline information as key benefits I want to point out that are all combined here in that detailed pane. The custodian and agent were not previously displayed, branch locations displayed, but may have not identified or been linked to a main school. And then compliance and disciplinary actions are currently on the website, but in different locations. So the goal here is to combine all of that into one display for the end user to make it an easier tool for them. Let's see. The other option here is the back button. So in the current search tool, it's minor, but in the current search tool, you have to hit the back button on the browser. Not necessarily on the BPPE website. So that takes you back to the search results. In this case, you hit the close button. So it's minor, but it's an easier option. This is basically a window that pops up for you to view the school and then returns you back to your original search results. So it makes it easier to track back to if this one was selected in error. Moving on to the next one. This is just a drill down into that details pane. So you're seeing the institution details, main location for physical and mailing addresses, and then also custodian of records is the addition here that I mentioned previously. Moving on to the next slide is the drill down into agency services and the branch locations that I mentioned were in different locations previously, and now will be housed all within this table that you see here. Same is true about the empty fields on these slides. Test record data, we may have not inputted specific information for those. And then let's see, last slide, approved programs and the compliance inspection. So as I mentioned before, this is what's been built so far and is planned for deployment once we have confirmed full sale conversion. This will continue to be developed and refined and enhanced as it needs to be according to the BPPE requirements as we progress towards that targeted release date for full sale conversion. Thank you for your time. That is the last slide. Open for any questions you might have.
Very good. Committee members, questions for Jeff on the new search functionality and development?
I had a question about the way the results are displayed. I don't know which, on our materials it's slide 27, but it's the one that says search results. And where you have, the primary status and the secondary status. I know on the search results currently, there's like a little paragraph above that explains what those things mean. But I wonder if it's, and I know you guys, this has been a long project, so I hate to kind of say like, can you add this to it at this point? But I just, sometimes when you get search results, there's like a little info thing you can click on that'll kind of give you an explanation of what that means. I'm wondering if there's going to be a way for students to be able to understand what primary status and secondary status means and what those different active and approval to operate categories mean.
Yeah, happy to take that. As I mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't see your name on here. Lee, sorry. Thank you, Lee. As I mentioned before in a previous search, in a previous tab, it likely land on the first slide, the test environment slide, where it introduces them to the verify a license or search institution. As I said, there's various locations within this search tool where we have content management permissions. So if that's the case, then just like your current version, we have the capability to enhance that, make that as simple as possible, or be as robust as possible in terms of explaining what the user is going to see and how they see it, and then what it's defined to do in terms of explaining some information to them. So we'll take advantage of those opportunities. And then, as I mentioned before, if we have those permissions, those updates to that content are immediate. There's not a concern about if we catch something that can be changed within the hour if we're missing something. If that helps you, I hope.
This is Margaret. I have a ton of questions and comments. And in connection with what Lee was just asking about, I haven't the faintest idea what primary source and secondary source means. Can somebody explain that so I know then what I would be interested in learning about it on the website?
I'll have to defer that to maybe Sean can take that, or if the
Hi,
product
Jeff.
owner
Yes.
is on board. Thanks.
I'm here. Jeff, can you hear me? Just want to do a quick mic check.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay, great. Sorry, I just reconnected my audio as things were choppy on my end before that. So apologies if that is the experience of the committee here, but hopefully you're hearing me. So primary status and secondary status, the concept of those exist in the current database as well. It's a way to reflect where a given institution is and their ability to offer services. So for example, a primary status of active and secondary status of approval to operate means that they are good to go, thumbs up. They're a school that is out there. Another combination that might be there is active, I believe, and like renewal pending, to show that their renewal is currently pending and being in process. So there's a handful of different definitions as to what primary and secondary status mean. While the audio was choppy, I did hear one of the committee members, I think, make a suggestion about some sort of hover over or definition so that students and other consumers would be able to understand what those mean. We have implemented those in other systems, so that is definitely something we can take back and look at if we don't already have that in our product backlog of things that we'll be implementing.
That's great. I was just following up with what Margaret was saying. That was I didn't understand what those two different statuses were either. And I would imagine that a student, using this to look up a school wouldn't have any clue what that means, and just giving them some sort of real practical definition of, yes, this means, and I would imagine the schools would want that too, because there could be some confusing terminology that would lead a student to think, well, I don't know about that school. So I just think that,
totally agree.
I would take it a step further and say, I don't even know why we would have those terms primary source verified as on the first slide, and then I think it's used later. Basically what you're saying is active or inactive, and then current status. Something simple English that students could understand, I think, would make a lot more sense. I think the whole thing going through here, that's what we need to keep in mind, is if you can make it facially clear, even better. So that would be something that going forward to try to see if, you could recategorize those if possible. Is that something that can be done?
The concept of how we want to organize schools into different categories to reflect kind of from a status or secondary status perspective, where they are at either in the application process, where they are at in the ability to operate, where they're at in a discipline process, as there are some statuses that are associated with reflecting the fact that a school has had their approval revoked or something of that nature. We have worked with subject matter experts and staff to organize them in a way that we feel encapsulate all the different sort of scenarios that they could be in, as well as trying to simplify them as much as possible. Always welcome additional feedback, additional perspectives, such as the committee members have shared, particularly with your roles, as advocates for the consumers and looking out to make sure, looking at things from that perspective. We can take these recommendations back and run them by the subject matter experts, in regards to revisiting some of this. Would be open to that and could work with Debbie on that as needed, and encourage any other sharing of thoughts that you all have on this. Thank you.
Yeah, a place to look at it, for example, it's on our page 22, which is where the search results come up, and you've got primary status and secondary status. And as I'm understanding what those are, the first one just means, is the school active or not active? And the second one means, what's the current status? And under, so maybe secondary status would be current status or something like that. Just, I don't know, it's somehow a little bit clearer, I think, because primary and secondary, they seem to be kind of two different things, and yet they seem to be using the same term. So I think that's why it might be some helpful to make it simpler. Another question I have is on when a student is doing a search, can they search? It wasn't entirely clear to me, but I assume this is the case. They can search by program only, correct? They don't have to put in city or school or anything else and find all the programs, for example, in the state that offer particular subject matter?
Correct, Margaret.
Okay. And then on the what is it called? Export Excel. Is there going to be a function where if a student doesn't have Excel and they just want to print a copy of what this says, that they can just print a copy, or can they is there any other program in which they could insert it, like a Word program, table, or something like that?
Yeah, I can take a look at that. That option is customarily available, as I've tested this tool in other capacities, where if it can't trigger into that MS Office option or program, then it allows you to save and select another different program type or a print option.
Right. Yeah, because I'm thinking, a lot of students may be just operating off their cell phones today, and they may not have an Excel program handy, but they might be able to print it, connect to a printer, or they might be able to download it in some kind of a word processing program, something like that.
Yeah, or just like you said, a file on their smartphone for a while.
Or a file on their smartphone, exactly. On the when you get to view details, which is our slide number 28, you mentioned the back button, but the back button currently is named close, which I think back would be more helpful than close, because you don't know what you're closing sometimes when you hit a close button. And back, I think most people understand it should take you back to a prior screen. So just a little thing there. In the view details on that same page, I can't tell exactly from the without seeing it live, but it looks as if things like the custodian of records and the agent for service are listed sooner than the approved programs and the compliance inspection. And in my mind, most times, and obviously staff will know about this too, when students or some of the other committee members, when students are looking something up, oftentimes they would be trying to find out about a program or a school. The only time they're interested in the custodian of records or agent for service is usually when the school is closed, or when they want to file a lawsuit or something. So if these are in order, I would change that order so those things come later in the order of what pops up, so that they would get the school, and then fairly shortly after that, what programs are approved, the compliance inspection results, and so on. And I think you said, or I read somewhere, for compliance inspection results, you're only including the most recent one in this. Is that correct?
No, I mentioned compliance and discipline actions currently on the website, but they're in different locations on our current version. So the purpose here is to now provide them all displayed in one location under this table that you're seeing in the screenshot on this slide.
So if I would click on compliance inspections, it would show me any compliance inspections done at that school over the last however many years.
It might, you wouldn't have to click on it. It'd be more of a table like the other tables you see.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So it would show up here. If they'd had 3 inspections, all 3 would show up. And the results show up here, or you have to link to those?
I'm not certain about that, so I won't speak to it directly until I have an answer for you.
Right, because I couldn't tell the detail here, but obviously that would be important to see the results and have it fairly accessible. And if it can't be done right here, to have it with an easy link. Because I don't know if you have a lot of, if you happen to have a lot of violations, that could be a pretty long table. And it's basically for the compliance and the discipline, both.
Sure. Yeah, this is just, as I mentioned, a test record. So they'll become more robust as we build out more test records and then have more internal staff kind of bang away at the keyboards to help us do testing as well.
Right, that would be interesting to know what is intended to be included there, whether it would include the description of violations, what if any remedial action was required, that kind of thing. And where it says discipline actions, is the intention to include only VPPE disciplinary actions or also any adverse actions taken by other agencies that they have to report?
I am not certain about the enforcement activity in terms of what could be displayed. That would come down to a bureau policy decision in terms of what they'd like to provide there in that table. But I think these are good takeaways for us to verify what information will exist.
Right. Because there's a whole lot of information right now, but you have to sort of click through a whole bunch of stuff to get to it to figure out. But that would be very helpful to have all of that there. And then the other thing is this is not currently set up to link to, for example, if a student looks up a program at a particular school, to link to the fact sheet. And that would show the completion rate and the job placement rate or license rate for that particular program. And that is really, I guess, a question for the Bureau, because I think there are some pros and cons to doing that. But I guess the question I would have is, assuming a student did want to find those things out about a particular program, has anybody analyzed what they would have to do to get there from this search engine? And I don't think that's probably a question for you folks, so it's probably more for the Bureau. I think those are my questions, but if I have more, maybe I'll just send some along later. Thanks.
Jeff, would it be possible to include the advisory committee members in the user acceptability testing for this search tool? Or is this search tool scheduled for UAT?
This one is scheduled for UAT, as I mentioned, when we are prepared for full sale conversion. So
what is the target? You referred to the target for that. What is the target?
Yeah, summer is kind of what we're pinpointing right now to see how this module works and continues to work and be tested, along with that other targeted prioritized scope that we can involve in the potential release for that date too. To your question about advisory committee members becoming user acceptance testers, I mean, Margaret's got a ton of good ideas. Would definitely increase the backlog, but that's okay. That's what it's there for. We've done that occasionally in the past. We have to basically set them up with DCA accounts and things like that. And almost treat them like a private contractor for a period of time, unpaid in that instance, because all of these environments and all of this testing is being done behind the firewalls at DCA on our servers. So if that's the case, if that's a big need for you, then we can discuss it. We've used it occasionally in the past for other programs.
Yeah. I would just like to add, Chair Holt, to that. some of the technical considerations that Jeff mentioned are not insurmountable. They are surmountable. So we can figure that out. And I think that targeted toward advisory committee members, we would kind of factor it into what we consider like external user stakeholder feedback. Typically, like what we like to do on that is make sure that the feature and functionality for what we're working with you on is pretty solid. Like I recognize that it won't be completely fully baked, but we definitely want it to be robust enough and reliable enough to click around and show you guys things like that. So I think we're pretty close there on the license search. So we can work with Debbie and Jeff to figure out a good time to maybe do a focused external stakeholder feedback type of session with you to identify some polish to put on this thing before we put it out there, and then also identify considerations for improvements as we move forward, maybe with some of the things like fact sheet that were mentioned by Margaret. As we don't just get one shot at this. Once it's even out there in live in production, we can continue to refine and improve upon it as we get feedback from the public as well.
This is Margaret. I'm sorry. One other thing that occurred to me is that it would be good, I think, when you get the initial search screen, if there were some kind of explanation there that this is only searching private post-secondary schools under the Bureau's authority, and if possible, actually even have a link to, if there is, and I'm not sure there is, a similar type site for, say, community colleges, where the student, if they wanted to search community colleges that offer those programs, could then link over to that site, and or state universities. But it might be helpful to just, so that they recognize I'm not searching the whole realm of available possibilities. And the other thing is, my question is, when you're doing user testing, are you actually using student or student equivalents to test this?
We are utilizing, so we have external facing features. We also have internal facing features. So we typically focus on making sure that the internal facing features and that the things that are tied to that it might be externally facing are working in a solid manner. And then we open it up to select kind of external stakeholder feedback for this. So we work predominantly with the staff and then do kind of selective external feedback for certain features, like search might be one of them, to consider doing that for. So we do not have like students on staff that we are testing with. It is primarily subject matter experts from the Bureau and IT staff.
Right. I was sort of understanding that when you were doing user testing, you actually were testing the search function with outside student equivalents or something. And in considering that, or including advisory committee members and some of that, I think also people who work with students on a daily basis, like some of the legal aid people, it might be very helpful to see if they would be willing to participate in some early testing when you're, and I'm talking about just the external stuff, not, obviously not the internal stuff.
Yes, thank you.
Just on that note, I'm happy to help with recruiting of staff at legal services if needed.
Advisory committee, any other questions or comments, feedback for Jeff or Sean regarding the search function?
I just want to say, I think we've had a lot of constructive feedback. I also just appreciate how much better this looks than what people see now. So I just want to say thanks for showing us that, and I appreciate the progress.
I agree.
Okay, hearing no other comments. And Jeff, this concludes the IT system project. That is 6A on the agenda. Is that correct?
Correct.
Very good. And if you would go ahead and open at this time for public comment, or we're going to reverse course on good counsel that given the breadth of the subject matter, we're going to go ahead and take each a letter under agenda item 6. So we're open for public comment for the IT system project. That is agenda item 6A.
And we have opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If you'd like to make a comment on the presentation of the IT system, please click on the question mark icon in the lower right corner of your WebEx screen or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device. Type the word comment into that text box and click send. And the other option is anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom of the WebEx screen. And call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Each commenter will have 3 minutes. Any comments on the presentation? And we have a request for comment from someone logged into WebEx as Vusala Aranjo. I'm going to send you a request to unmute and you'll have 3 minutes to speak and you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm actually representing. And I'm wondering, I'm sorry if I missed this, but my curiosity is more around the reporting, the reporting section of the portal. And I'm wondering, how can we access or understand better improvements or the changes as far as the reporting section is concerned? Will the information still be required to submit it in different kind of chunks or different pieces versus as one comprehensive report for the entire annual year? That's it. That's my question.
All right. Thank you very much for your input. Are there any other requests for public comment at this time? All right. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please do. And Vusala, thank you for your comment. At least on my end, I had some issue with the mic coming in and out, but what I could discern was that maybe you had a question regarding annual reporting, and I would encourage you to email bppe at dca.ca.gov. Again, our public comment times are not effective Q&A mechanisms, so I would encourage you to email the BPPE maybe with that question. And that concludes agenda item 6A. Thank you very much, Jeff and Sean. Appreciate it and wish you the best as you have this sprint to the finish here over the next several months.
Thank you so much, committee members. Have a good day.
We'll move on now to agenda item 6B and the licensing report.
Perfect, and we'll turn it over to Ebony Santee, our education administrator, who will give both the licensing report as well as quality of education report.
Thanks, Debbie. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, hello, Ebony.
Hi, how are you? So I will start with the licensing statistics for the fiscal year 22-23, quarter 2. Next slide, thank you. I do want to start off by just a thank you to the licensing unit. Great job for consistently working on getting these average days to approve down in all but 2 sections. We've gone down in those days to approve. And a special thank you to Manager Jeff Mackey for gathering all this data for the advisory committee. So looking at a few of these, for new approvals, we received 17. For the full approvals, for accredited institutions, we received 17 applications, 31 renewals for full approved schools, 47 were for accredited institutions. As far as changes, for full approval schools, we had 79. 105 applications were received for accredited institution changes. We received 126 verification of exemption, 24 out-of-state registration. Looking at those average days to approve, we did go up slightly for the full approval. However, 4 institutions' applications were identified as causing that spike. a highlight of those issues included external approval from another agency. A couple of them took over a year to become complete, or just about a year, I should say. Multiple deficiency letters, as well as, again, another pending external approval. So we can identify those issues when they come up. But otherwise, as we can see with our new accredited approvals, those went down 82 days as far as average days to approve. Our renewals for full institutions went down 9 days. The accredited renewals, this was only our second category that went up in average days to approve. But most of those, as you can see, I think 32 of the 43 that were under review are pending new terms of accreditation. So that does significantly impact those days to approve. As far as our changes for full approval institutions, those went down 69 days. Changes for accredited institutions went down 23 days. For our verification exemptions, those went down 15 days, and our out-of-state registration went down 56 days. So really proud of the team for working successfully on those numbers. Next slide, please. Just a deeper dive into some of those pending. The oldest full application in the queue is currently with licensing under review. You can see that it took about a year for that to become complete, for us to even assign it to a analyst. As far as the oldest full application under review, they just submitted a deficiency response, which is currently being reviewed by the education specialists in the quality of education unit. I will say, I know Margaret had a question previously if that institution was operating. In this instance, we do have information that they previously, I'd say around 2016 or 17, had been granted verification of exemption to operate. So it is likely that this institution is operating. That is not always the case, but in this instance, we do have a record of them being granted that verification. As far as the oldest renewal full application, as of today, this institution is no longer the oldest. They are no longer pending. The resolution was that they were revoked and do not have an approval to operate. So that will be updated to a new school the next meeting. And the oldest, or the median date of full apps in our queue, is from October 2022. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of our population: 969 main locations, 360 branch, 511 satellites, for a total of 1840. Of those, 417 were approved by means of accreditation. 529 have a full approval. There is 1 conditional, 21 provisional approvals, and 91 out-of-state registered schools. And that is the end of the licensing information. I can go on to QEU, or would you like to stop here if there's any questions?
Let's stop here. We'll keep the letters separate. Thank you. And so I'll kick off questions from the advisory committee. In an earlier meeting, the committee had discussed, I think on Debbie's original idea of a chess clock analysis as being a meaningful way of looking at how much time applications spend, particularly for those longer processes, how much time they spend on each side of the tennis court, if you will, between the Bureau and the institution. Has there been any further discussion or progress on tracking data in that way?
Yeah, definitely. We have used our practice run, and we are still instituting that. It hasn't completely been rolled out yet, but it definitely is in process. And also that's, a way that I was able to get some of this information, because the managers and myself have utilized the format that we have, that we will be rolling out to analysts shortly.
Great. Just wanted to add again a hearty endorsement for that. I think it's good just to have clear line of sight for that. It's good accountability for both the Bureau and for institutions. So I really endorse that fully.
This is Margaret. Thank you for getting back on that question I had before. And I just wanted to ask, I think I may have mentioned this before, and I don't know if this is an appropriate place, but, and it doesn't need to be at every meeting, but I would like to see somebody put together the total number of mains and branches and satellites annually going back a few years. There have been comments by audience member that, you know, the Bureau was causing all these schools to fail. And it seems to me we still have a very large number of branches, satellites, etc. And I am just curious, you know, has there been an impact on the number of schools in recent years under this current statute, which has been in effect now a few years? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I made a note of that.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments from the advisory committee on agenda item 6B, the licensing report for Ebony? Hearing none, we'll move to open public comment on agenda item 6B, licensing report. Anne, would you do that?
Certainly. We've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment on the licensing report. If you'd like to make a comment, you can click on the question mark box, typically at the lower right of your WebEx screen, type the word comment in that text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. We do have a request for comment from WebEx user logged in as Robert Johnson. Robert, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. You're unmuted.
Margaret probably refers to some of the comments I've made in the past in regards to the number of institutions and how that's counted. Bureau has traditionally, for some reason, insisted on just counting branches and mains as separate institutions. The reality of it is that many of these institutions and branches are owned by a common company, a partnership or individual owner. So to get a true sense of whether or not the sector has decreased or increased over the last 3 or 4 years, it would probably be important to count the actual ownership as institutions. For example, there are companies that own multiple campuses and branches. There are also institutions that are singly owned and operated by an individual. Properly look at oversight, it would be important to understand what is exactly the number of institutions left in California. Counting branches and mains might be helpful on a discrete level, but from a policy standpoint, it's important to understand what is the numeric count for institutions operating in California, because that certainly has huge impacts on oversight costs. And to keep operating under the theory that there are 1,000 different institutions working in California is incorrect. Their probably real number is less than 300, but that's a guess that I'm making. So I can't say that's a definitive fact. But I think this is something from a policy standpoint that the Bureau should take seriously and do some work on. Thank you.
And I do not see any other requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you, Robert, for your comment.